All right, what's going on, guys? Coach Bronson here, and today we're going to do something that I have not really done before, but I saw this video and I felt like I really needed to give my perspective on the topic. Uh, I follow this channel here. You're seeing it on my screen, Nutrition Library. I think it's a great channel to get a lot of information about all sorts of nutrition topics, supplements, just things that are going on, how to optimize your nutrition, things like that. Um, I saw this video pop up on my screen earlier this week, The Dangers of the Carnivore Diet. And he goes through, it's about, I don't know, was it 20 minutes long? He goes through some points about some things that uh, it's a little sensationalist, right? He's not really talking about the dangers of the carnivore diet in this video. He's more talking about some of the issues that he sees where going carnivore could impact your ability to perform athletic activity. Okay. And you guys know that's one of my favorite topics. And so, what I'm going to do is we're going to watch the video. We're going to go through it and I'll stop and make points along the way. I think, again, this guy's got great, I don't know his name. I know Nutrition Library. I haven't dug too much into his background. He does have a degree in nutrition and dietetics. He's got, like I said, he does good breakdowns on a lot of information. What I think happened in this video, I'll just couch it this way. What I think happened in this video was preconceived notions and expectations of how things should work, taking to the concept of the carnivore diet and then just applying that stuff. So this must be what happens when someone goes carnivore. So this is what happens a lot of times when someone who has an education in the system based on the institutional knowledge about nutrition, biology, that kind of stuff, and applies that existing set of knowledge to a lifestyle nutrition protocol that doesn't have the same level of research and uh, institutional backing, let's say, to provide good data. So you're taking what you currently know, you're applying it to something that you don't have any experience with, that you haven't worked with for years, and you haven't done the research to see how these things could be working instead of that are different than what you've been taught. Okay. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go through each of the points that he makes, and we're going to go through. I'm not a biologist. I don't have a degree in nutrition. I've done a crap ton of research, and I've been living this lifestyle for the past 5 years as a high intensity athlete. Okay. So my experience is going to be, we're going to talk about this is what we're going to do. My experience, the information I'm going to provide in my rebuttal, let's call it a rebuttal, or my perspective, my point of view of the information presented in this video is going to be experiential, my personal experience. It's going to be the clinical data that I have working with individuals doing this lifestyle for years. Okay. It's going to be my experience of the communication, the talks, and the knowledge I had based on other people that I have worked with, colleagues, doctors, scientists, and athletes who have been doing this for years. It's going to be a combination of my research that I've done for my books. I've written 2 books on the topic, and the third book that I'm currently writing, and the hours that I have spent looking at papers, doing the research, reading the scientific journals, and going through the things so I can have a better understanding in my own interpretation of the data, how this stuff works. Okay. So doesn't make me any more of an expert than this guy is, but my experience is different. So we're going to change the point of view and perspective based on the things that I've actually seen happen in real life. Okay. Let's get to it. All right. Let's see if I can figure this out. This is the first time I've done shared video on this kind of thing. So if I mess something up, deal with it. All right.
In which I somewhat concluded that the carnivore diet appears to be a fairly effective approach at optimizing testosterone production. However, with the carnivore diet gaining more and more mainstream attention, I thought it would also be a good idea to take a more balanced look and approach at some of the possible downsides of the carnivore diet as well. Now, the first and most notable downside to the carnivore diet appears to be a reduction in athletic performance. Now, in the carnivore and ketogenic communities, there is a large emphasis on the body's ability to adapt to using fat as an energy substrate. And according to the literature, this does appear to be a very measurable phenomenon that does, in fact, occur when switching from a carbohydrate based diet to a fat based diet. And because of this adaptation to utilizing fats for energy as opposed to glucose, there does appear to be a somewhat sparing effect on muscle glycogen levels, which is the stored glucose in muscle tissue. However, the issue here is that alongside the adaptation to utilizing fat and increasing the body's ability to use fat for energy, there also appears to be a downregulation in the metabolic processes that utilize glucose to produce ATP. And the reason this is not necessarily a good thing is that when you
All right, I want to skip back for a second. Let's look at this screenshot he put up there. If I can find it again. Okay. The part that he's got highlighted, okay, it talks about impaired performance of high-intensity exercise via a downregulation of carbohydrate metabolism. Okay, it's harder for your body to metabolize carbs. We're looking at this. It's not that. Okay, look here, right above, 2 lines above. Furthermore, a 2 to 3 week exposure to minimal carbohydrates. Okay, that's the bare minimum to get adapted to physical activity. 2 to 3 weeks, you might be normally adapted. If you guys have read my book, Ultimate Ketogenic Fitness, if you have looked at any of the stuff I've talked about, I talk about 3 levels of adaptation. There's keto, there's being fat adapted, keto adapted, and keto optimized. Okay, fat adapted and keto adapted, a month, 2 months, you're good to go. Your body's really good at breaking down fatty acids into proteins from food or your body, and then your body's really good at breaking down fatty acids, and then your body's really good at breaking down fat from your body into ketones. The third level, that's where that is, right? The third level of really being keto optimized for physical performance is when gluconeogenesis is able to function more efficiently in a ketogenic adapted body. So ketogenesis, the byproducts of ketogenesis feed gluconeogenesis. So gluconeogenesis needs to learn how to work when you're not giving it carbs. Okay, and I'm going to talk about this in my third book, the one I'm working on right now, where what if, let's just take this hypothetical, what if the benefits of going ketogenic have nothing to do, okay, they will have something to do because there are plenty of benefits of being keto adapted, being in ketosis on a regular basis, and those types of things. But what if the real benefit, the secret benefit that nobody knows or talks about, is that when we go ketogenic, we improve gluconeogenesis. We improve the body's ability to utilize fatty acids, proteins, and other non-carbohydrate sources to create glycogen, because that's what gluconeogenesis is. Gluconeogenesis is not just turning amino acids into glycogen. It can use the byproducts of fatty acid metabolism and other substrates in order to generate glycogen and ATP. All right. So something to think about there. All right. It's not that your body is down-regulating carbohydrates. Well, let's take it back. Let's look at it this way. Here's a whole other way to look at it. Let's say, yes, it absolutely is down-regulating carbohydrate metabolism because it's increasing your fat metabolism. So it's in the process of adapting. So yes, your carbohydrate metabolism is going down. And what I'm talking about is your body's ability to process exogenous carbs into a form, glycogen, that your body can use, that your muscles can use. That is absolutely down-regulating because you don't need to do it as much because you are no longer eating external sources of glycogen, of carbs. Okay? So the process isn't a bad thing. It's part of the transition. What they should also talk about, which I will have in a study, is while this is happening, your carbs are down-regulating, your carb metabolism is down-regulating, your fat metabolism is upregulating. Okay, there's a study, which I'm going to link. Any study that I reference in here, I'm going to link in the description. So there's a study in here that says, I think I got a quote somewhere, that shows an increase in fat utilization for keto adapted CrossFit athletes. So athletes doing CrossFit training, their fat adaptation, their fat oxidation increases. Okay, at noticeable intensities of exercise during CrossFit at 80% of their VO2 max. Okay, so what they're doing, the work that the efficiency of their body is increasing as they increase their intensity. All right, something to think about. Right, so yes, the carbohydrate metabolism is going down is because your fat metabolism is going up. It's a switching period. It's a transition period. This data that he's pointing out is only 2 to 3 weeks. You need up to 12 weeks for this process to complete. Okay, let's keep going.
That utilize glucose to produce ATP. And the reason this is not necessarily a good thing is that when you get into the maximal range of work output of around 70 to 90% of your VO2 max.
Just covered that. Okay. CrossFit athletes increasing fat oxidation at 80% of VO2 max.
These types of activities actually require glucose as an energy substrate. And so if there is a down regulation in the efficiency of the metabolic pathways that use glucose to produce ATP, there does in fact appear to be a reduction in physical performance, specifically in this 70 to 90% of your VO2 max.
Which, like I said, is understandable. You're not eating carbs. Your body's ability to metabolize external sources of carbs is no longer going to be as efficient. There's no carbs to process. Okay, so you're switching from carb metabolism to glycogen to fatty acid conversion through gluconeogenesis into glycogen. It is a different process, and it takes more than 2 or 3 weeks for your body to get there.
Now, to be clear, there does not appear to be a reduction in performance when it comes to endurance activity or even types of activity like powerlifting that heavily rely on fats and creatine phosphate as an energy substrate. However, when you are engaging in activities that require glucose, such as hypertrophic activity, or even things like sprinting or anything that gets you into your 70 to 90% of your VO2 max for extended periods of time, there does appear to be somewhat of a reduction in performance. Now,
all right, again, he's talking about based on, if he's solely basing this conversation on the study that he linked, we're talking 2 to 3 weeks. My personal experience, it took me almost 3 months to get to a point where my high intensity interval training, CrossFit, sprinting, those types of exercises were back to where they were and then some. It improved my physical ability, the personal records and the things that I was able to do after the full adaptation happened increased exponentially. There was a time where there was several months where it seemed like every single day I went into the gym, I was able to do something more than I'd been able to do before. Lifetime stuff, not just in the last couple months, like setting lifetime PRs in WODs and lifts and just different things that I was doing. It's absolutely phenomenal. I see it repeated in clients. I talk to people all over the world. That is what happens to them. Okay. The issue 99% of the time with somebody talking about carnivore not being good for high intensity training has to do with them not giving it enough time for the adaptation to take place. Okay. It's not 3 weeks. It's not 8 weeks. It's not 10 weeks. At least 12 weeks for most people. Some people may see benefit earlier than that. I have a lot of people who start seeing increases in their ability to do more work, which we'll get into later, is the recovery aspect, sooner than that. But in general, to really see the benefit, it's 12 weeks is a good sweet spot. Okay. Yeah, we'll just leave that for now.
Now, this is not to say that a low carbohydrate, ketogenic, or even carnivore style of diet doesn't have its place when it comes to athletic capacity, and specifically in regards to increasing the body's ability to use fat as an energy substrate for particular time periods. However, if you are someone who is engaging in regular activity that requires glucose as an energy substrate, it may be beneficial to somewhat add carbohydrates back into your diet on top of a carnivore style of diet in a proportion to your activity level, just to ensure that you aren't experiencing any reductions in performance. Now,
Okay, so I want to add a couple things here. One, watching the rest of this video, you're going to see one phrase and set of words that continually repeats itself, and that is, it appears and it may. Okay, which is perfectly fine. He doesn't have the experience of doing this, from what I can tell, to be able to say, this is what I've seen. Okay, so I'm here to tell you that in my experience as a coach who's been coaching people in carnivore for almost 5 years, who's been a carnivore for over 5 years, this is what happens. Okay, and I'll tell you what happens based on 2 studies that I'm going to give you quotes from. Okay. We already quoted the one, talked about the VO2 max, fat oxidation increases at 80% of VO2 max. Here's another one. Our studies suggest that a 12-week ketogenic diet is in recreationally trained CrossFit trainees, okay, facilitates, which is most people that do CrossFit, facilitates improvements in whole body adiposity, fat loss, without compromising weightlifting, running, or aerobic performance metrics. Okay, that sums up what CrossFit is: weightlifting, running, and aerobic performance metrics. Okay, another one states a 6-week ketogenic diet has no effect on exercise performance or body composition in CrossFit practitioners. Our findings demonstrate that a ketogenic diet does not impair CrossFit performance, which may be of interest to those considering a ketogenic diet when participating in CrossFit. Okay, 2 studies. Those will be linked in the video in the description. Okay, but that is what I see. Okay, not only is there some data out there for people that have put structured tests together, but what I've seen in my experience. Okay, we'll talk about this towards the end. I think I've got a study. I took, right, 24 women who were 45 and up. Okay, perimenopausal, menopausal. We gave them a ketogenic diet. We gave them functional fitness based on CrossFit methodologies, high intensity interval training. Everything about their performance improved over an 8-week period. Their body composition improved over an 8-week period. Okay, it happens every single time.
Now, with that being said, if you are committed to a low or zero carbohydrate style of carnivore diet, it is thought that adding some extra electrolytes into your diet can help to offset some of the downsides to athletic performance that a
100%.
low carbohydrate.
All right, 100% on the electrolytes. Electrolytes are one of the number one, if not the number one tool that you can leverage while you're transitioning, and then even for the rest of your life as you're doing physical activity. Increasing your electrolytes will help in your transition from being a carb burner to a fat burner. Okay, I should say from being carb fueled to being fat fueled. Okay, because even when you are ketogenic and fat adapted, you are still a carb burner. Remember that. We could not be alive as a ketogenic human being if gluconeogenesis wasn't part of the process of our internal biology that created glycogen for the things in our body that need glycogen. We couldn't do it. Keto couldn't work without gluconeogenesis. So there's no such thing as not being a carb burner. Think about that, right? Okay.
Hydrate diet can cause, which is why today's video is actually sponsored by Element.
Element.
Now, Element is a perfectly proportioned electrolyte mix of sodium, potassium, and magnesium that makes it
I've got some in my coffee right now.
easy to help meet your electrolyte needs in order to
I'm not marketing Element, but I drink Element 6-7 times a day.
Stay optimally hydrated, especially while on a low carbohydrate diet. Drinking Element lately during my workouts, especially during the periods of low or even zero carbohydrate consumption, has absolutely been a game changer for me personally. And so if you're anything like me, trying to optimize and maintain optimal physical and mental performance under somewhat extreme dietary conditions, I can't more highly recommend Element. And what's more is that right now they're offering you guys a free sample pack of an 8 serving of Element for free with any order, but this deal is only available through the link that's in the description of this video. So make sure to follow the link down below or go to drinkelement.com/nutrition library to snag this offer. Now,
before we get into this next piece that he's going to talk about, I want to add, because I have it in my notes and I forgot to mention it. One of the other aspects of going fat adapted and this whole you carb hitting a wall, carb depletion, all this kind of stuff, it's all BS. Okay. In general, outside of the fat debate, let's not even think about the being fat adapted. Let's not even think about going carnivore, ketogenic, whatever, doing physical activity as a carb or as a fat adapted person. Okay. Just looking at the body's ability to store glycogen. Okay. We can store up to 700, maybe more calories of glycogen in our body. An average workout, even an advanced CrossFit athlete, is looking at 300, 350 calories burned on the high end of a CrossFit workout. Okay. The average person doing CrossFit, the enthusiast, the 99% of the people that go to CrossFit gyms and work out who aren't trying to get to the CrossFit games, they're probably closer to 250 calories in a workout. So you've got around 3 days worth of glycolytic high intensity activity that you could do. Okay. If you're assuming that the entirety of your training each day is glycolytic, because when you're doing CrossFit, some of it's going to be ATP phosphagenes, some of it's going to be glycolytic, some of it's going to be oxidative. It's not all. You're not doing an hour-long class and the entire class you're doing high-intensity interval training. You're doing high-intensity interval training for maybe 20 minutes on average. Okay. The rest of the time you're working in the other 3 metabolic pathways. So you have days and days and days. If you never ate a single carb, you have days and days and days of stored glycogen in your body that can work for you to do the physical activity that you're doing. Okay. So just going fat adapted isn't going to mess you up right off the bat and cause an issue. Okay. There is a process. You may notice something the first few days. You may not. Okay. Some people go carnivore. They stop eating carbs. It takes them a couple of days. When it comes to physical activity, they may start seeing some issues, just general energy wise, as their body's like, hey, wait, I don't have this. I need to figure this out. But they can still have things to access. There's still fuel available to access. Okay. And it's not the inavailability of fuel. It is the inefficiency at accessing the fuel that is the problem. I want to make that clear. It's not the inability to, it's not the unavailability, the amount that's available. It's the ability to get to it and utilize it efficiently. That's the problem. All right. Back to our normally scheduled program.
The second possible downside when it comes to a carnivore style of diet kind of goes along with our first point, and that is a reduction in the ability to build muscle mass.
Y'all know where I'm going with this one.
Now, the first possible reason for this is somewhat obvious. If a low carbohydrate style of diet does in fact reduce the body's ability and down regulates the glucose dependent metabolic pathways that fuel hypertrophic training, you would obviously expect to see a reduction in the amount of muscle mass that is built secondarily to the reductions in performance that are specifically in the range that are required to stimulate muscle growth. Now, it is worth noting that there are 3 metabolic pathways.
So basically, if you can't work out as hard, you can't grow as much.
That are thought to lead to muscle hypertrophy.
Theoretically, assuming that the can't work as hard is actually a thing, which we just talked about. It's not a thing. So if the level of effort and performance does not decrease, then this initial hypothesis is not valid. So the idea that you can't work out as hard, so you can't grow as much muscle, is mute. Okay, so I'm not even going to get into that. We've already addressed the energy thing. Loss of performance by being ketogenic is not a thing. Therefore, the inability or difficulty of building mass because you can't work out as hard is also not a thing.
One of those is fueled by fat, one of those is fueled by glucose, and the other is fueled by creatine. However, it is believed that the metabolic pathway that is fueled by glucose is the most potent in regards to stimulating muscle growth. And so again, if there is in fact a reduction in the abilities of the cells to produce ATP via glucose, you would expect to see a reduction as well in the ability to build muscle mass as well. Now, another possible reason that the carnivore diet may reduce the ability of your body to put on muscle mass is because the carnivore diet encourages a reduction in caloric intake.
This absolutely blows my mind that this is a comment. This is something he said. All right, we're going to keep going and then we're going to jump in.
Many individuals find it fairly difficult to maintain the caloric intake that's required to maintain body mass while on a carnivore diet, much less consume enough calories to increase their lean body mass while on this type of diet. And so if you are specifically trying to increase your lean body mass, this may be of practical concern to you in particular. Now,
okay, I would love to know what calories do for building muscle. Okay, your body doesn't build muscle based on how many calories you eat. This is one of the areas of this video where the fact that he has a degree in nutrition and dietetics is obvious, because this is something that somebody who has that institutional information would say. Okay, calorie intake doesn't mean squat for building muscle. Okay, what you need to build muscle is protein, stimulus, and recovery. All right. And obviously, you need to be able to fuel the work, which we already talked about. Fueling the work to do the work, to get the stimulus, is not an issue. So we don't have to worry about that as long as you're eating enough food. Nobody is going to build muscle on any diet if you're not eating enough food to give your body the nutrition that it needs. So the base assumption that you're eating enough is across the board. We're assuming you're eating enough food. Okay. So if we're eating enough food in general, then whether I go from some carbs to no carbs, that isn't going to make a difference as long as I'm getting the protein that my body needs for muscle protein synthesis to grow muscle. And I'm stimulating my body by challenging it and breaking that down so that it can then rebuild, recover, supercompensate, and increase performance. Okay. We can't talk about overall my experience of people improving performance if they're not able to get stronger, if they're not able to build more muscle. So the ability to improve your physical and athletic ability requires more muscle. Then yes, you absolutely can increase your muscle mass on a ketogenic carnivore diet. Okay. It's not about the calories when it comes to building muscle. I'm amazed at this in 2023 that I actually have to clarify that.
Now, another possible reason as to why the carnivore style of diet may decrease the body's ability to increase muscle mass while on a carnivore diet is that the carnivore diet does appear to decrease the inflammatory response to exercise. And because the inflammatory response is so integral to the anabolic response to exercise, it may secondarily to reducing the inflammatory response, reduce the body's ability to recover and compensate for that athletic activity. And then the last part.
Okay, that was complete conjecture on his part. That entire statement was absolutely 100% complete conjecture. may, could, possibly. All right. Let me tell you from experience what happens to me, to my clients, to everybody that I talk to. And I've talked to hundreds of people. Okay. Your inflammatory response absolutely reduces. What that allows to happen is it improves your recovery and allows you to increase volume. Improves recovery, allows you to increase volume. So this is a great example of the interpretation of the information. Okay. He's interpreting it as if you're reducing your inflammation, you're not triggering that response to heal. And that's where recovery and supercompensation comes from. Okay. It could, because inflammation is part of the healing process. Inflammation is good, particularly when we talk about exercise. Okay. What he's not realizing, because he doesn't have the real world experience to see what the impact of reduction of that inflammatory reduction is that you go from working out 2 or 3 days a week, feeling like you got hit by a truck every single day, to feeling effing amazing and working out 5, 6 days a week. 4, 5, 6. You add a day, you add 2 days, you add 3 days, and you feel awesome the entire time. Your workouts are awesome every single time. You go in and you blast it every single time. Okay. Injuries go away. Okay. Again, my personal experience. Before I went carnivore, I was a CrossFitter. I owned a CrossFit gym. I had torn calves, pulled hamstrings, pulled adductors, torn labrums, torn meniscus in my knee. I was hurt or injured all the time. My training was always being interrupted by an ache, a pain, a pulled this, a pulled that. Something had to be modified or adjusted or scaled because something was always hurting. Okay. Within months of going carnivore in 2018, within months of going carnivore, I have not had, since that time, it's been over 5 years. Since that time, I have not had a single injury, ache, or pain that has kept me from training. Okay. Outside of a bone spur that I got on my elbow. That's it. That got me bursitis and blew up my tendon, things like that. Outside of that, I haven't had a training injury or a training ache or pain that's kept me out. Okay. The hamstrings, the adductors, the shoulders, all that stuff went away. The inflammatory response that was causing chronic issues in pain and reduction in recovery went away. There is still enough of an inflammatory response that allows the body to do what it needs to do, because now it's not dealing with the extra work of the carbs. Okay, we talk about that in other videos. Eating carbs increases the overhead of your body's performance, thereby making everything more expensive. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. The practical application of the reduction in inflammation is an increase in volume, which leads to an increase in performance.
Possible reason that a low carbohydrate or carnivore style of diet may decrease the body's ability to increase muscle mass, according to recent research, is by increasing the oxidation of dietary and endogenous amino acids. Because amino acids can be used for the process of gluconeogenesis, or the process of taking non-glucose substrates and turning them into glucose, there may be an increase in the body's need for protein. And so if you are going to choose to stay on a low or zero carb style of carnivore diet, you may need to increase your protein requirement in order to meet the demand of gluconeogenesis, in order to kind of build that foundation so that your body has enough amino acids available to then build new tissue. Now,
so this is another thing, is I don't know all of the studies he's referencing. I haven't dug into every single study to do a high-end analysis of all, where, how these were built, how long they were doing, what were they eating, that kind of stuff. I can tell you, based on experience, that most people that I work with need to eat more protein anyways. So the idea that you should eat more protein just because of being ketogenic is not something, honestly, that I've really heard before. We talked earlier about gluconeogenesis is not just converting amino acids into glycogen. Look up the definition of gluconeogenesis. It is the conversion of fatty acids, amino acids and other non-carbohydrate sources into glycogen. So there's other things on the list that gluconeogenesis can use in order to make glycogen. So the need to increase your protein, I would say, has more to do with maintaining hormonal health, maintaining thyroid health, maintaining your body's ability to recover, maintaining your enzymatic production, maintaining muscle protein synthesis, and maintaining your general performance and metabolic function in general. Okay. So most people need to eat more protein across the board, anyways. So, sure, eat more protein.
There is a strong argument to be made that simply increasing your caloric, protein, and fat intake while on a zero carb carnivore diet can help to offset many of these downsides that can lead to lowered anabolic activity. However, one of the biggest factors that appears to lead to decreased anabolic activity is just simply a down regulation of the use of glucose for the purpose of sparing muscle glycogen. And so it's really
no. The downregulation of glucose is because you are not yet adapted. And we're talking about the downregulation of metabolizing external sources of carbs into glycogen. When you're not eating the carbs, it will downregulate. You're transitioning from your body's ability to create its own from the byproducts of fat adaptation. Okay. It takes time.
Really hard, and it's really hasn't been seen yet if this can be actually overcome by possibly like a long-term zero carb.
Hasn't been seen yet if this can be overcome by a long-term carnivore diet. I don't know if I even need to say anything there. 5 years, carnivore, CrossFit athlete. I do all the things. Okay. And again, my experience, 12 weeks on average is where it is how long it takes people to see this be overcome. What he's talking about, it has yet to be seen. I see it all the time. It's about 12 weeks. That's the answer to the question. 12 weeks. Do it for 12 weeks and then come back and tell me that you haven't seen an improvement in your performance, an improvement in your recovery, and an increase in the volume of training that you can do.
Diet. However, for those that are specifically trying to maximize physical performance and maximize anabolic activity, introducing some level,
as long as you're eating enough. Okay. One of the mistakes people make, and I think he talks about this later, we'll discuss, is some people get into this and then they think it's you have to eat less. No, eat what you need to eat. And there's a process of finding out how much protein, how much fat you should be eating. But if you're trying to improve your performance, starving yourself is not going to do it. Your body needs protein, your body needs fat. You need to make sure you're getting enough to fuel and provide the structure of substrates that your body needs to function. Okay. You still have to maintain metabolic function and then provide more so that your body can grow on top of that. All right. That is one of the mistakes people make. They start thinking this is a diet and then they change over to cutting out carbs, and then they also starve themselves by not eating enough. Okay. You still need to eat food, guys. You still need to fuel your body and give your body the things it needs. If you go carnivore for 12 weeks and then come back and tell me that it didn't work for you, I can tell you right off the bat, you didn't eat enough. 99% of the time, that's the problem. You don't do this as a trying to hit a caloric deficit while you're doing it. You eat what you need. The caloric deficit, and he talks about this later, the caloric deficit, the body composition changes will happen on their own. Okay. Because when you eat mostly animal meat, it is hard to overconsume overall food and fuel. Right. So you don't need to think about this in the way of I got to hold back because I'm trying to lose fat. No, in order to improve performance, you have to provide the tools and the fuel that your body needs to improve performance. Okay. Going carnivore and fasting, going carnivore and going OMAD, going carnivore and over just reducing the amount of food that you eat doesn't work. Eat what your body needs. That's the first thing.
of carbohydrate intake in proportion to your activity level may be beneficial in this regard. Now, the next possible downside of a carnivore diet is possible elevations in cortisol and stress markers. Now, it has long been thought that one of the primary downsides, hormonally speaking, when it comes to a zero carb or carnivore diet is an elevation in cortisol levels. And to be fair, this does appear to actually persist for about 3 weeks while transitioning from a high carb to low carb style of diet. However, after that 3 weeks and after that adaptation period appears to happen, there does appear to be a drop of cortisol and other stress hormones back down to baseline. However, it is yet to be seen whether or not those that are engaged in regular glucose
Okay.
dependent activity may actually experience an extension of this period.
Okay. So he's saying that in the transition time, cortisol tends to go higher. Yes. And then it goes down after a few weeks. And then he just said, it is yet to be seen. God, I love this. 5 years. I'm just going to use my numbers, guys. Before I started carnivore, my cortisol was around 57 on average, 55 to 57. Okay. 6 months after May, June, July, August, September, 4 months after because of May 1st, May, June, July, August, September, 5 months after I went carnivore, I did a blood test, and I've done blood tests regularly since. Okay. I haven't seen my blood work under 28 for cortisol since I went carnivore. Okay. So I went from a 57 cortisol level before carnivore to a 28. Okay. 5 years. I have not had any issues with cortisol, any symptoms or signs, any issues that I can tell from having high cortisol in that time. Okay. I know a lot of other people that can say the same thing. So yet to be seen. Again, in his experience, it is yet to be seen. In my experience, I see it all the time. Okay. Stress markers go down the less when you do things that don't create stress. Okay. Nutrient dense, bioavailable, satiating food is less stressful on your body. Anti-nutrients that you're no longer eating remove stress from your body. Fiber that you don't need, that you're no longer taking in and irritating your gut, your intestinal tract, and a bunch of other things is removing stress from your body. Okay. Carbs, which have to use a different pathway to be metabolized that your body doesn't necessarily want to use because it increases oxidative stress, reduces stress on your body. So I don't understand how we can say when we're doing something that is, number one, historically accurate, Clay, that's how human beings developed optimally, and how ingesting foods that are the most nutrient dense, the easiest for our body to access them. And because of that, we don't have to eat as much of it. So the process of digestion and metabolizing that food happens less frequently. How any of that stuff is an increase to stress. None of that makes sense to me.
If you are engaging in activity that is demanding glucose and you are not consuming any glucose, it is possible that there may be an extended period of time whereby you do actually experience elevations in cortisol and elevations of other stress hormones. And to some degree, there is some evidence to suggest that this might be the case, simply because when you look at individuals that are engaging in activity.
Let's look at this. The higher increase in cortisol during exercise on low carb versus high carb diets appears to persist post adaptation. Resting and post exercise.
Even several months after going onto a low carbohydrate diet, they do appear to not experience a baseline increase of cortisol, but do appear to experience an increase in cortisol levels when compared to controls during specifically their activities.
Which isn't a big deal.
Now, for most people that are transitioning from a standard diet to a carnivore diet, this may not be of practical concern. However, for individuals that are engaging in regular glucose-dependent activity, maybe guys
It's amazing how all of this stuff is being compared to and related to glucose dependent activity. We addressed that at the very beginning of the video. Your body has the glucose that it needs. Your body has the glycogen that it needs because it's designed to provide it. Okay, gluconeogenesis will provide whatever your body needs from a glycogen perspective, regardless of the activity that you are doing. So any issues that he talks about that are a result of glycogen dependency are mute and not valid because we addressed that at the very beginning of this whole process.
That are maybe elite level athletes or bodybuilders or something of that nature, this may be a practical concern and reason to somewhat add some carbohydrates back into your diet in order to keep stress hormones lower. Now, the next downside.
All right. I will say there is a little bit, there is some nuance in here when we talk about chronically lower insulin, okay, having an effect on cortisol, right? They're antagonists. We know that. When you are striving for, and this is one of the reasons why, if you talk to Dr. Cyrus, you talk to Bart K, you talk to different people, and we get that information. I have these videos with them on this channel, so go take a look at those. Chronic elevations of ketones, always being in ketosis, is not something that we're striving for. We're striving for being ketogenic, which is our body's ability to convert fat into ketones. And we're striving for keto optimization, which is our body's ability to utilize as many things as possible in gluconeogenesis to create glycogen. Okay, that's what we're looking for. We want those two processes to be functioning well. Okay, if we are chronically in a state of high ketones, ketosis, we are chronically in ketosis and our insulin is chronically low, then we're not triggering things that we need to be triggering. Our thyroid needs insulin. Our liver needs to create insulin, and it needs insulin to do things. We need insulin to store proteins. We need insulin. Insulin is an important thing. Trying to always keep your insulin low for fear that it's going to cause insulin resistance is a problem. We do not want chronically low insulin. There are times once a day is recommended by some experts, twice a day, once a week is recommended by others. On some regular frequency, we need our insulin to come up so that it can do the things it's meant to do. Insulin is involved in a lot of metabolic processes. It is a metabolic hormone. Your metabolism cannot function in chronic states of low insulin. And that's where this issue with cortisol, the next one he's going to talk about sex hormone binding globulin, and the next one he's going to talk about after that thyroid function, are all offshoots of that conversation. If you are going carnivore, trying to keep yourself in ketosis, you're doing it wrong. Okay? You're doing it wrong.
Side is actually a possible increase in SHBG levels, or sex hormone binding globulin. Now, this is something that I dive super deep into in my latest video on sex hormone binding globulin, but there may be a insulin-dependent pathway whereby a low-carbohydrate diet might induce elevations in sex hormone binding globulin. Because insulin appears to suppress SHBG when you reduce your carbohydrate intake, there is a reduction in insulin levels that does appear to allow for a rise in sex hormone binding globulin.
Bingo. And this is just what I said. Chronic states of low insulin can cause problems hormonally, right? If you have somebody who is having issues with sex hormone binding globulin, it is likely that they are not eating enough, okay? Or they are doing a lot of lean protein. One of the issues we see people doing in carnivore wrong is they're focusing on lean protein and they're keeping their fat too low. You need adequate protein, you need adequate fat, okay? One of the reasons is not for your hormones, it is for the combination of the two through GLP-1 and other mechanisms, okay, to stimulate insulin. Protein can stimulate insulin. Fat can stimulate insulin. It does it in two different ways, in the stomach, in the intestines. You need them both in order for that to happen. There's a short-term insulin spike, and then there's a long-term insulin rise, okay? And you need the combination of fat and protein together in order to get that insulin to stimulation to happen. That needs to happen on a regular basis. If you are focusing on lean meat in your carnivore diet and you're not getting enough fat in your food, then it's very likely you are trying to maintain ketosis. You're in a chronic state of low insulin. You're going to have issues with cortisol, sex hormone binding globulin, and thyroid function. Okay? You need to get fat and protein together.
Now, for the general public that isn't engaged in frequent glucose-dependent activity, this may not be a practical.
Again, what he's saying isn't necessarily wrong, but it has nothing to do with your activity. Okay, it's just basic metabolism.
Concern. However, for guys that are working out several times a week in that maximal range of activity, you may be placing your body into a position where it needs more protein and more fat and more calories, and places a higher demand on glucose because of that. And this is one of the possible reasons why you may be seeing an elevation in sex hormone binding globulin. So again, for the general population, this is probably not of practical concern, but for guys that are highly active, you may either want to be extremely mindful of your caloric, protein, and fat intake, or two, to just simply add in your diet.
That is one of the best things you said so far. Be mindful of your protein and fat intake.
Carbohydrate intake in order to meet that
Not your
glucose
carbs, though.
demand and reduce the demand that your body is placing on protein and fats to produce glucose. Now, the last possible downside that I want to talk about before we get into some of the upsides of the carnivore diet, and specifically a zero carb carnivore diet, is possible reductions in thyroid hormones. Now, this has long been postulated in the ketogenic communities and likely has some relevance for the carnivore community, and that is because largely thyroid hormones do appear to decrease or can possibly decrease when glucose intake is reduced, and that's because thyroid hormones, one of their primary purposes is to metabolize and increase the metabolic pathways that.
Correct. And not correct.
That metabolize glucose. And so when you reduce your glucose intake, it is thought that there could be a reduction in thyroid hormones. However, for me personally, this is a non-issue, largely because I believe that you can offset this by simply increasing your iodine intake, increasing your seafood intake, as well as possibly even supplementing with a desiccated thyroid hormone.
So he's not wrong here. As either I recommend everybody should have seafood in their normal routine on a regular basis, anyways, for that reason and others. But in general, in my experience, the issue is much more about people not eating enough. Okay, a couple things we talked about. One, if you're not eating enough, everything's going to be screwed up, including your thyroid. Okay, not eating is a thing when it comes to thyroid. Many women that I work with who come and say, I've got thyroid issues, eat more and those thyroid issues go away. Okay. Just eating more protein. Okay. Even if they're eating enough, there a lot of people are eating tons of food. It's a lot of fat. They're not getting enough protein because we thinking about this whole ratio concept that everybody wants to get stuck on ratios that don't mean squat. Okay. Stop looking at ratios. Give yourself the amount of protein that it needs. Give yourself the amount of fat that your body needs, and things will work better. Okay. I need this much fat. I need this much protein. I need to support my thyroid function by increasing protein. Thyroid utilizes amino acids to create metabolic hormones. Okay. So if you want to improve your thyroid health, you need to increase your intake of amino acids, not fat. Fat is a different type of hormones that you also need fat for, okay? But it's not the same, okay? There are protein hormones, there are fat-based hormones. You need both protein and fat in order for your complete picture of hormonal health to be there, okay? And then the second thing is what we talked about earlier. Chronic states of ketosis, low insulin levels can be an issue for your thyroid. Okay. We want to make sure that we're getting that fat and that protein in enough of a bolus each meal to break that ketosis a little bit, get that insulin up, do the things that it needs to do, help maintain thyroid health. Okay. So that we don't have to worry about elevated levels of cortisol and all these other issues of having a chronic state of low insulin. Okay. So it's not about glucose. It's about eating enough food and eating enough of what you need protein and fat wise.
Or thyroid gland specifically. Now, with all of that being said, it is my general thesis for the general population, a low carbohydrate or even zero carbohydrate carnivore style of diet can be a great way to improve overall health and well-being, as well as hormonal status.
All right, because this video is getting kind of long already, we're at a little over 50 minutes. I'm just going to cut through. He basically goes over some of the benefits of carnivore diet. He talks about avoiding food sensitivities, sustained energy levels, which I think is an interesting conversation in that the benefit is sustained energy levels, but at the same time, you don't have sustained energy levels or energy enough to do physical activity. Interesting conversation. The benefits of ketosis, which again, often misused term. It's not ketosis as much as it is being ketogenic. That is where more of the benefit comes from. It's not about the fat. Don't chase ketosis. It's about being optimized to create the fuel from what's in your body, not what you eat. That's where the benefit comes from. Okay. Increased nutrient intake, 100%. The more you base your nutrition on animal-based whole foods, the better your nutrition intake is going to be. And then he talks about weight loss. At the last thing on weight loss he talks about, let's get there.
Choose to go on a carnivore diet is weight loss. However, I do think it's worth noting here that the only reason that the carnivore diet appears to be effective at inducing weight loss is simply because it's inducing a calorie deficit. It is particularly difficult to overconsume calories while on a carnivore diet. And it is particularly filling. Meat is very filling. And so it's really difficult to overeat while on a carnivore diet. And you're also eliminating some of the more tastier foods in life. You can't have pizza, you can't have bread, you can't have any of these types of foods that tend to induce overeating. And so,
all right. So part of the argument is correct. All right. In that, yes, it is much harder to overeat on a carnivore diet. Okay. So if somebody has been eating the standard American diet, they go to carnivore, they're going to eat less calories, absolutely, and they're probably going to lose a ton of weight. Even eating more protein than they're used to doing is probably going to be in an overall deficit from what they are used to eating, and they're going to lose weight. There is so much more to it from a metabolic performance perspective that I don't even have time to go into the additional ways in this video. Okay, but optimizing hormonal function, optimizing metabolic function, reducing inflammation. There's so many aspects to going to a carnivore diet that go beyond just you're eating less calories. Okay, so just understand that yes, calorie deficit is part of the equation. You're eating less food in general. You're eating less fuel. Okay, but you're eating less fuel while you're also cleaning up the fuel that you are eating. And that is where a lot of the health benefits come from. And we're also not talking about weight loss. We're talking about fat loss, because it absolutely is possible to maintain or gain lean mass as a carnivore. Okay. Eating a carnivore diet, you can build mass, you can maintain lean mass and still just lose body weight. Okay. You can gain weight on carnivore as well. Okay. You can increase your overall total caloric intake above your BMR, above your TDEE, and still lose body fat. Okay. There's a lot of nuance that goes into the calories, body composition discussion when it comes to carnivore. Okay. But you can stuff your face. And if you do it in the right composition of food intake, you can actually still lose body fat, even if you are eating above your total daily energy expenditure. Okay. I've done it. I've done the test. I've done it myself. I've seen it happen in other people. Right. So yes, calories definitely make a difference, but that's not all there is to the discussion. All right, guys, that is the summary, my feedback on the different topics that he talks about in the dangers of the carnivore diet. Let me see if I can get this to go away here. Boom. All right. If you have any questions, I hope that answers some questions. If you guys heard anything that you hadn't heard before, then maybe you learned something. Hopefully, if you have something you want to agree with, disagree with, please let me know in the comments. But I kind of like, now that I know I can do this little video screen thing here on the side and go through videos like that, that might be something that happens more. If you guys have some videos you'd like me to look at, send it to me. I'll take a look and see if it's something I can respond to. But hopefully that was helpful, and I'll see you guys next time.